Holy smokes, you guys. This conversation with Caylie Opatik is amazing. She is a single parent who shares her parenting journey, and she talks about her not only her journey as a parent, but her journey as a child of God. She has such an amazing, incredible, impactful story about trusting in Him and abiding by what He asks of her. And even though it might seem scary, especially being responsible for another human being other than yourself on this journey, and just reaping what she sows. And we talk about rest, and we talk about her podcast, The Responsible Parent, and how the nervous system is crucial for not only children, but for adults and parents as well. And this conversation shook me to my core. I got goosebumps during this conversation so many times. Her story is just so impactful. All the blessings that she's received, where she was a year ago from where she is today, like never in a million years she would have thought that her story in just the last year would have unfolded the way that it did. I'm standing outside staring at the moon, reaping in this cooler air. Fall is upon us. I can feel it coming, even though it's still those warm days. I'm looking forward to those crisper, cooler temperatures. And I'm just so excited to share this podcast with you. I hope you can take something from it in your parenting journey, in any kind of journey that you might be in, or a season that you might be in. She expands on so many seasons, so many big crucial moments in her life of parenting that she needed to expand on that courage muscle and to trust and to lean in, and how that has built her into the woman and the mother that she is today. So please help me in welcoming Caylie Opatik to the podcast. Welcome to the Kindred Journey Podcast, the podcast where women share their experiences of stepping into courage when comfort is no longer an option. This is the podcast for connecting in community with women who have been shaped by the liberating to challenging seasons that life endures. I am your host, Leslie. I am a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and friend. I too have experienced these seasons in life, and I want you to know that you are surrounded by a community of courageous, real women here for you. I can't wait to connect, so grab your favorite beverage and join me on this kindred journey. Hi, Caylie. How are you?
Hi, Leslie. Good. How about yourself?
I am not too bad. I am so glad that we finally got to connect. I know it was kind of not spur of the moment, but just we were connecting here and there, and then I'm glad it worked out. Followed up, like, are we going to meet? And so I'm
Yes.
glad we got to have this conversation.
Absolutely. No, I think it's so wonderful that we met at the Her Turn to Podcast Summit,
Yes.
because I just think, like, I don't know, what other environment would you make these sort of connections, you know? And so I just feel so blessed coming out of that whole experience to have met you and so many of the other women that we like went out to eat with, because I feel like even if I never talk to him again, it was such a beautiful, like, heart connection that day, you know? So I love that we get to follow up.
Yes. Yes, I couldn't agree more. I was actually just reminiscing. I was listening to something, and it brought me back to May already. Gosh, that was already 3 months ago.
Wild.
It's so crazy. My youngest turned 5 months yesterday. So, and he was 2 months old when I took him to that summit. So I'm
That
like,
was so sweet.
I know, I was known as the lady with the baby. So
Can we do like a quick aside with that? Because that was the most magical thing ever. And I'm pretty sure I mentioned it in my podcast episode, like immediately after that experience. I was like, this woman came with a newborn baby, and like literally just passed her baby around, and it was so loving. And so like every woman was like, yes, absolutely. Give me child. Like
Yes. I felt like it was
give
the
me the
best
baby.
room to be in with support because
Yes.
I was so grateful for women, moms, grandmas
Yeah.
wanting to hold him so I could take notes or to just
Yep.
experience the sound bath or it was just such a
Yes.
beautiful, like you said, it was so loving and it
Yeah.
truly does take a village. That's what it reminded me
Absolutely.
of was us
Yeah.
women. And not only that, but so many women came up to me and were like, my daughter's at home. I can't wait to share that you're here and doing this
Right.
with a baby. And it was
Yeah.
empowering for people. And it was brave. And I did kind of question
Hmm.
myself the morning I flew to LA. I was
Yeah.
like, holy shit, what am I doing? With a
Doing.
2-month-old and leaving my
Yeah.
2-year-old behind with grandma and grandpa. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was definitely an experience. And I'm so proud of myself for
Mhm.
even though there was some angst and some anticipation about
Mhm.
going, especially that morning, I'm so glad I went. And the experience, like you said, those heart connections that if you never see these women again, actually, Ashley, I can't remember her last name, but she was on your podcast a few
Oh yeah.
episodes ago. And her and her wife, we got in a cab together from
Oh,
LAX to get
that's
to
awesome.
wherever we needed to go. And I was
Yeah.
like, I don't know these people. I'm getting in a car with strangers. And like, is this
And
okay
my
with my
baby. Yeah.
baby? Yeah, it was just stuck in the back of a Prius. I rode bitch in the
Oh,
middle of a Prius on the
yeah.
way with my son on one side. And I'm like, nice to meet you. We're getting really close and personal.
Right.
So
Oh,
it was just a fun experience. It was such a fun,
absolutely.
memorable experience. So I'm so glad that
Yeah.
we crossed paths as well. And
Yeah.
thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I just to cap that off too, I think that is the first experience that I know of that I have witnessed such how do I put this? A sea of maternal support by strangers.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've seen it in a group full of, your family and your friends, whatever, but it like seriously moved me. Like I'm pretty sure I cried, like seeing everybody taking your baby. I was like, this is so cool. Like
It
not that you
was
were literally like throwing your baby around, but
right.
just the amount of like comfort with everybody who was here to support you, who's living to support your kid. And it was just such a cool, beautiful full circle moment. So
Thank you so much. Yeah, I said my prerequisite was I need to know your name if you're going to hold my son.
right.
So, because
Give me your
there
business
were,
card.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. There were so many people that, you've seen, through the group or
Yeah.
that but didn't know him in person and I
Yeah.
hadn't didn't know anybody in person. That was my first time meeting we have a mutual friend, Chelsea, and I was like, you're real. Like you're not
Yeah.
just on another side of a Zoom
Right.
screen.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
such a fun experience. Well, thank you
Yeah.
for being here, and I
Yes.
know we got the chance to connect and we've kind of been reminiscing on that, and but if you could
Yeah.
maybe share with the listeners a little bit about you, a little bit of your backstory and kind of what you're doing and you're on your side of the world. We're a few hours
Mhm.
apart.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited actually that you are on the topic of courage right now, and especially courage in parenting, because I feel like this is so integral to who I am and the identity of my story. And so the fact that you're going over this right now, I was like, yes. It's funny because usually, oftentimes, I feel like women, especially, don't feel like our story is worth sharing necessarily, or kind of we have the who am I to share. But when it comes to stories about courage, especially with parenting, God has just been nudging the living crap out of me lately to be like, you got to find somewhere to share this. You got to find somewhere to share this. So when you reached out, I literally was like full body yes, like absolutely, we're gonna do this. So I love that. I love that you asked me. So again, I'm so grateful and thank you for having me on. So my name is Caylie Opatik, and I am the host of the Responsible Parent podcast. It's available on all of the podcasting um, platforms that you can imagine. Apple, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, everywhere you want to be. And I started my podcast just actually this past February 2024, um, out of courage, sheer courage, right? It was something that, and this is a huge theme for me, and this is likely what we'll be talking about today, but I just felt God calling me towards it for years and didn't was like, oh, okay, all right. Well, I'll take little actions and I'll set the foundation and I'll set the and everything was like underground, underground, underground. And you couldn't really see what I was doing. And then a big shift in my life happened, which we'll talk about later. And then I said, okay, it's time to start this podcast. And so um I am a solo parent to my 10-year-old daughter, and her name is Olive, and she's incredible. She is, I say very often, I never in my life wanted to be the person who didn't have an identity separate from being a mom.
Mm.
Um, I thought that that was really unhealthy, and um, I just thought I was very sure of myself before being a parent. And I really wanted to be a parent. I wanted to have like 12 kids growing up. Like it was something I wanted to do, but I didn't want that to be my only identity. But I can say with confidence now, a decade into being her mom, that I don't know who I'd be if,
Mm.
oh man, I'm gonna cry so many times on this, but like I don't know who I would be if I wasn't her mom. And so this journey has like pushed me forward in so many ways. It's just been so incredible. So um, I grew up here in West Michigan and I'm back now, but I went to school for fashion design in Chicago. Um, and then I had my daughter in Southern California. And then we spent half of her life in Portland, Oregon, where I was working for Nike. And then about 4 years ago now, we moved back to Michigan. And yeah, so that's why I'm here today. And I'm still, I'm a working mom, obviously, since I'm a solo parent.
Right.
Yep. And so the providing financially as well as emotionally and all the other ways has been solely my responsibility. And so her dad and I work together great now, but it's not exactly 50-50. So
Yeah.
progress and incredible things, but obviously one of the reasons I have the name of my podcast, The Responsible Parent, is because that is what I am, is the responsible parent. However, it also ties in a little bit tongue in cheek because a lot of the decisions that I've made through my parenting journey have been the opposite of what I've been raised to believe
Mm.
is responsible. And so that's a huge part of the courage in my journey. I feel like as there's been a lot of coming up against and butting heads with what society was telling me, what my family and the people who love me most were telling me I should be doing, and having the courage to stand up and say, I know that's the easiest thing, but like, hell no.
Mhm.
I'm not doing that. Um, and that's just been a huge part of my journey. And so my podcast is about helping overwhelmed families naturally regulate their nervous system, because I feel that that's a red thread that has totally ran throughout my journey. But there's so many things that go into that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you, Caylie, for being here and for unpacking your story just a little bit. I know there's so much more and there's so much I would love to unpack with what you
Right.
said. And I might just like briefly, but for the sake of time, and I want you to
Yeah.
be able to share your story. But I just thank you for having the courage to be here to share your story first and foremost, because I think there are so many parents out there, like just what you said, what you were raised with or believing that was normal or what you should be doing. And you're kind of going against the grain a little bit with parenting. And like you said, what a beautiful thing about being Olive's mom. You don't know where you would be without being her mom. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that why motherhood isn't our sole identity, it's a
Mm-hmm.
part of our identity and who we
Yeah.
are. And I feel like that identity unlocks so much potential and so much capacity that we didn't even realize we had before being a
Valid.
mom.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm here. I mean, truly, I started my
Mm-hmm.
podcast because I kind of grieved I was 32 when I had my first son, and I was grieving my old life a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
social connection because it can be very isolating at times. And hats off
Absolutely.
to you for being a single parent, because I have been solo parenting all summer and it's fucking hard. Like, I'm gonna put it out there. Like it is the hard, like parenting is the best, hardest thing. And being a mom is
Mm-hmm.
the best, hardest thing I've ever done. But doing it by myself, especially with two and under, it's hard.
That's tough.
But I started this podcast because I wanted to connect with women again. Like I'm such a social person, and I felt
Mm-hmm.
having to be home for bedtime, like you have to be
Yeah.
responsible, you're
Yeah.
responsible for other people, other beings than yourself. And while a part of me was grieving my old life, that's the part of me that's created this podcast so I could
Mm.
and women encourage, and that's what I'm passionate about right now. And having your stories as women motivate other women to step forward into that courage, or to be able to get through that courage if they haven't chosen it. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you again so much for sharing that. I commend you in all facets of your life. And like you said, you feel like God has called you to be here, and having those God nods, man, they might be subtle, but they're real. And I
So
can
real.
concur to that. So
Yeah.
we'll just dive right in. I'm just so excited. I don't even know what we're going to talk about, but I'm just so
Yay.
excited.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you. I
um,
appreciate all of that.
oh yes. So if there is a moment, and yes, August is my month since we're kind of back to school mode, or a lot of families are. I thought parenting would be an
Yes.
appropriate topic for the month of August, kind of getting back into rhythm, and summer
Yeah.
is not over, but getting towards the end chapter of summer. Is there a season or moment in your life where you had to step into courage when comfort was no longer an option?
My gosh. Like I said earlier, I feel like that's like my identity. Like there are so many. I literally had to write down like a list and try to pick from it, but I didn't really need to because I know what story I need to tell. But and it's my most recent story, really, of courage and parenting it because it's a hero's journey story, right? Like it has a conclusion and it's fresh and it feels good, and I haven't told it yet. So I need to get it out there. But you had Heidi Lowe on your podcast, and she
Mhm.
had talked about how she feels that like your moments of courage, they kind of all culminate together, right? They all add up and kind of build upon each other. And that's totally how I feel as well. Like I wouldn't have been able to make the move that I made over the past moves, many, many moves over the past year, if I hadn't had built that courage muscle, right?
Mm.
I feel that um, you know, it's a muscle that we really need to build. We have to stretch the muscle, and then we have to feel the soreness from exercising the muscle, and then it gets bigger and it's easier to take bigger and bigger leaps of faith. Um, and yeah, so I'm just gonna briefly list off like a few little, not
Sure.
little, a few like um moments of courage that I feel are milestones in my parenting journey, to lead up to my past year. And so I think the first monumental moment of courage that was just an insane amount of, I don't know, yeah, like energy and strength from myself in my parenting journey was unfortunately leaving Olive's dad.
Mm.
And so that was just something that never in a million years did I think that I would ever do, right? Like I was raised with the belief that you don't have a baby until you're married. And when you get married, you love each other and you stay together forever and you stay together for the kids and like all of these things, which I'm not saying is right or wrong, but it definitely wasn't right for our situation. And so we never got married. I got pregnant out of wedlock, and we just we did not work
Mhm.
well together. And so leaving her father was one of the biggest first moments of courage in my parenting. Um, just leaning into this is what's best for all of us. And we all agreed, all three of us, which was also,
Wow.
a good nod. But after
And
we
also
separated, what's it?
not very common that everybody
Right.
agrees with that kind of a separation and a grievance. It is
Yeah.
a grievance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Not that it made it any easier,
Sure.
and I mean, it still isn't easy, it's 10, almost 11 years later, and it's still not easy,
Hmm.
but there are parts of it that are easier. Right. And so I think that was one of the biggest first moments of courage. And after we separated, I was able to kind of lean back into going to church and exploring my spirituality and just kind of coming back to myself, I felt like. Um, and with that, a few years afterwards, I ended up having this feeling that God was calling me back to Michigan. And I was like, no, like immediately no. Like, what do you mean back to Michigan? Like, I was never going to go back to, what are you talking about? Like, I'm a West Coast girl. I have this dream job at Nike corporate. I'm like making warm-up uniforms for LeBron James. Like, why would I ever leave? I had a really amazing boyfriend at the time. Like, he's ready to be daddy and like husband, like, what the heck? And I got this nod from God, and it came from within myself. And then he started sending people from outside of myself, coworkers, family members, um, church messages, my boyfriend at the time, all saying the same thing. I think it's time for you to move to Michigan. And I was like, what? So I said, okay, well, I agree. I've been feeling this too, but I didn't know that it was going to be that firm. And I had this feeling in my gut that like, something big was happening and I wasn't sure what it was, but it felt like a big, like catastrophic world thing. And I was like, I don't know why I'm feeling this. This is so weird. And that was my first real understanding, looking back in retrospect, of the intuition and the foresight that I have a connection with. And I was feeling the pandemic coming. And
Mm-hmm.
so we moved in 2019. Just after we moved, I got a job in Michigan, and shortly after, and I was working at another global company, and we heard about this pandemic breakout as soon as I started my new job in November 2019, which then began to work its way over here. And with that, obviously things were shut down. The closest person, the person that my daughter loved the most in life at that point in time, way more than me, was my grandpa. And he lives
Mm-hmm.
here in West Michigan. And during that season, he had open heart surgery. And we were able to be there for him and for my grandma, and in a very physical, really helping him move around and her doing things type of way that would have been absolutely impossible if I didn't like take that nudge. I was like, I don't know why I'm going to Michigan, but I'm going. And then it just went. And so that was another huge leap of faith, I would say. But also it took a lot of courage, because that meant I was giving up. Again, I was sole provider. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was literally quitting my only income with no other. I didn't move with another job. I had no plan. I had no idea what I was going to do. I was like, I don't know. I laid in the grass for 3 months at my mom's house. I was like, I just need to regulate my nervous system, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
and then it came, a job came, and we were provided for, which was beautiful, just in time. But um, and then coming out of that experience as well with the pandemic, um, I mean, there's so many things that led to me wanting to homeschool my daughter. But again, single parent, working a full-time corporate job at a global corporation is very demanding and pretty darn high stakes positions. Like, it's not like I'm just a secretary or something. Like, I have
Right.
a lot of responsibilities at work. Um, and I'm like, I'm gonna homeschool my daughter. And God had set it on her heart. And again, kind of sent the same things. And, Olive was communicating with me that what we were doing clearly wasn't working. And, with the pandemic, it really, I know it was such a hard thing for so many people, but it felt like such a blessing for our family, our little
Mm-hmm.
family, because it was the first opportunity where I got to have that time at home with her. And I said, oh, okay, because I got laid off for 4 months during it as well.
Okay.
When she was in school still. And so the teacher responsibilities that fell on me, I was able to do because I was
Mhm.
getting paid to not work for 4 months. So again, just blessed. Like it
Amazing.
just like,
Right.
how can you even line that up, you know? And so I felt like it was a window of opportunity. And I don't know, have you read Matthew McConaughey's book, Green Light?
I haven't, no.
I don't read things unless they're like for education for the most part. And my friend Ellie was like, you got to read his book. And I was like, that sounds like something I wouldn't like. Like it's Matthew McConaughey. I'm not like a huge fan of him. Like he's okay, but whatever. She's like, trust me. And so I did. And it is really great. You can hear his voice through it. But essentially, it's his philosophy on life told through his life story, which is actually really incredible. But Green Lights, the reason it's called that is because he talks about he doesn't wait for a full yes before he moves forward with anything. It's just
Mm.
like a little crack in the door, and all of the other doors can be closed. And if there's one door that's kind of cracked open, that's the green light because there's a red
Mm.
light everywhere else. And he's like, okay, go, we're going to go that direction. And then that
Mhm.
has led him to the most like wonderful experiences in his life, essentially. And so I essentially took that philosophy with this with homeschooling. I was given that little green light in the 4-month period to go, okay, now I can kind of establish what this would be like. And then we went back into the office, and we were just working kind of hybrid from home. And I was like, okay, we're going to see what it's like to continue to kind of balance that out. But she did still have a school teacher. And eventually over the next 2 years, basically what ended up happening was a continual ride of all of these nods from God and from the universe that said, hey, this is what you should do. And I said, okay, God, I said, if you really want me to pull her, do X, Y, and Z. And he did X, Y, and Z. And I said, okay, you do the impossible, then I will figure it out. And so, yeah, as a solo parent, full-time corporate working mom, I fully homeschool my daughter. And
Wow.
it sounds like absolute insanity, but it took so much courage to fight the demons in my own head around what that workload would be and what that would look like. It took so much courage to continue today talk to my family about it, because they still will be like, there's just questions and there's just hesitations, and there are, is she going to be socially integrated? Is she going to be, educated? Is she all these things? And I can just say with absolute confidence, she's way better off than
Mm.
if I weren't have done it. And it was absolutely the right decision. And I don't believe it was just my decision. I believe it was fated in many ways. So,
Mhm.
um, so those are so the biggest, I think, parenting moments that took like really big courage from me leading up until this past year. And so those things like really helped kind of exercise my courage muscle.
Mhm.
um
And they're all huge. I mean, you
yeah.
like you said, I just something that you kind of touched on there at the end was, you have these inside inner dialogue demons, and then you have
Mhm.
probably external sources telling you, like you said, what you were
Mhm.
raised with and what should
Mhm.
be versus what you were feeling called to do.
Yeah.
Can you maybe, if you want to unpack that at all, like how you kind of, especially being a single parent, I'm sure there's plenty of unsolicited advice that come
Oh yeah.
from, you know, loved ones, probably with good intent, but also
Yeah.
like, well, you should be doing this or you should be doing that.
Mm.
I can only imagine, especially being like, or if you meet up for a friend with coffee, well, I do this, so maybe you should try. I just think
Yeah.
the noise, how do you turn down the noise? Because I feel like you're so intuitive. And like you said, earlier, it comes from within, and that's
Mhm.
God speaking to you. It's an
Yeah.
internal thing. It's not external, but there's a lot of
Mhm.
external noise and there's internal noise as well.
Yeah.
With our inner dialogue. So I don't know if there's anything you'd like to touch on with that or unpack that, or if maybe that kind of leads you to why the podcast that started came to
Yeah.
fruition or
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think number one, it's worth being said that it's not always turned off, right? And that's a constant struggle. I mean, we're human and we're not perfect. And I mean, there's a lot of times I just feel overstimulated from the amount of information that is being fed into my life, whether it be from myself consuming information because I'm looking up what I think that I should be doing. And I'm using ChatGPT to try to plan out my, single mom, corporate life, homeschool balance schedule, and I'm, XYZ, XYZ, and then also taking in that information. Like, it's not always perfect and the noise isn't always turned down. And I think that's something worth acknowledging. But when it is, and it is more often than not lately, which is nice. I'd say it's kind of three parts, actually. There's three things that contribute to that, and that's the way God built me, the environments that he's placed me in, and the relationship of trust that we've built, especially over the past 2-3 years. And so really all just going back to the greater loving intelligence that, is ever present. I think that the simpler you make life, the more divine everything is, right? And so it's really easy to be courageous because then it's not courage. It's not courage when you boil it down and you make it simple, right? And you go, well, I just trust. Like I've said, God, will you do this? And then he has. And God said, hey, will you do this for me? And then I have. And then he's rewarded me for that. And so that builds this trust relationship, right? And with that trust relationship, then it's not so much courage as it is just what's next, right? And I think that that's the biggest takeaway that I've had over the last couple of years, but especially over the past year. And so actually, that's a good segue into like what's happened. Here's my story.
I have
Like,
goosebumps, like
yeah,
literal goosebumps. I
yeah,
think that is so beautiful. And that's his one and only ask of, not one and only, but like to trust in me, trust in the
yeah.
Lord, trust in God. I think, and especially when times are hard,
Yeah,
I think that trust gets put to test. Like, do you trust in me? Like to
yeah.
get you through this? And that's also part of my story, and where this courage stemmed from was to, because times can, like things can be hard, and and I am so grateful that I believe in God, because I know where I'm going at the end of this life. So I know I'm comforted by that,
Yeah,
but also, like you said, to trust it, it's a relationship. I love what you shared about that. So
yeah. No, thank you. Yeah, it's been a journey, honestly. I wasn't raised Christian. Um, I wasn't raised really one way or the other, you know. My dad passed away when I was 13. He was a wonderful friend to everybody, not the best family member. Um, and I loved him dearly, but he treated me more like a friend, and he was an alcoholic, right? And then my mom was a single mom after that. And so she was just surviving, and I look at my journey today and I think about when my mom was this age, what she was going through, and I just have so much clarity, I guess, and compassion for where she was at, because I really didn't understand it at the time. And now I'm like, oh, I see. I understand. And I don't know why I went off on that tangent, but um now what were we talking about? You said that.
well, I think that's part of it, right? Like you're
Oh, with God. Oh, yeah.
like
Yeah.
and kind of what you just shared, like when we're in it, it's hard to understand the why. Not that we're
Yeah.
supposed to understand the why, we're supposed to trust, but
Mm-hmm.
once you get, like you said, you kind of revisit your, what's that,
Yeah.
what's the word I'm looking for? Like you looked back and like, oh, aha,
Yeah.
I got it, like
Retrospect. Yeah.
retrospect. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I understand now. And because
Yeah.
we're not supposed to understand the why, but
Mm-hmm.
like, it's part of the process. It's part of the journey.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of the trust. So,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I remember too, what I was getting at was I wasn't raised Christian, I was raised in like survival mode essentially. And I explored so my high school sweetheart into college years, was raised Catholic. And so he moved in with me in Chicago when I was going to school, and we went to a Catholic church together, and I just loved the ritual of it. And I loved like the frankincense incense, and like, like it was like, it felt, no, I will be crucified for this. I felt pagan kind of like in a way, there, like some of the traditions were just really like, just ritualistic, and I actually liked that, and it felt comforting to me. And so I kind of hung on to that. And then when I met Olive's dad, he was like totally against all sort of organized religion, and and was like, you better not, like this isn't going to happen. And so that part of my life was controlled, and we butt heads a lot, and so it wasn't easy for me to be able to continue on that path. And then I kind of dabbled back into Christianity after we parted. And then I also really dove deep into like energy work and, hypnosis therapy and Reiki and just everything, and I was really open to all fields and all things. And especially during the pandemic, like honestly, I think about the places I went for help, and they helped me. However, they feel like a real Band-Aid compared to the relationship that I've formed with Christ and with Jesus over the past couple of years, because I'm like, oh, this is different level stuff. And it's not the people or the community as much as it is the actual relationship with like this spirit, because I did open myself up to the spirit world a lot. And I've made relationships this way. I talk to spirits. Like I all sorts of whatever the Claires are, I was all of them. I am all of them. Right. And so I understand that world. And I don't think that, I'm definitely not here to say, especially on somebody else's podcast, that one way is right or one way is wrong. What I notice is that our lives ebb and flow. And what I notice is that people who are raised super organized religion usually grow up and do the opposite. And people who are raised super woo-woo or are allowed to kind of go wherever they want to usually grow up and fall into an organized religion. And so I'm kind of more on that side, because I grew up thinking I was Pocahontas and, talking to the trees and stuff, and,
Grandmother
like
Willow.
communicating with the wind. Yeah. And so like, and I still love all that, but now I see it through the lens of my relationship with God. And I'm like, so I'll definitely be, God has played the biggest role in my story of courage the past year. And so I just want to like put that out there as a preface, that I'm not saying that's the way, but it's what's happening for me right now. And it's worth sharing.
Well, thank you for having the courage to share that journey and story, because I think it helps others. Like I said, that's what this platform is for, is to help others through courage and to receive the clarity through a challenging time, and the bravery that of being open and to learning. And I love what you kind of shared about, like, religion is it's a man-made structural thing, but the relationship with God is direct between you and God.
Yeah.
And that's where the relationship, like you said, that's you said it, the others, how you said that was so beautiful. Like, it's more of a Band-Aid approach, but this is like next level. It's above third dimensional. Like, we can't see it. We can't like it's hard to grasp but it's there. Like, it's so interesting. But I like to preface every episode with this is your space to share your story. Everything you do say is honored and respected. And I don't necessarily have to agree with it. I just want to provide a safe space for women to share their story of courage. And that's one of my foundational approaches to this podcast. So thank you for sharing that. And maybe you can kind of go into sharing how he has made such a huge impact on you and the things that you've done in the last year plus. I mean, but
Yeah, thank you. No, I think it's so beautiful that you're such an open platform for that. So thank you. I commend you for that. I know I texted you that earlier, but Yeah, so I really wish that I would write down like all the bullet points because I know I'm gonna miss a million things because during this period of my life, it's been like every day. Every hour of every day, there has just been, like, wow, that's a miracle. Wow, that's a miracle. Wow, and so like there's no way I'll ever wrap my mind around all of the things that have happened and all the beautiful miracles, but I feel like I should start writing them down so I can kind of like take a peek and be like, wow, look at all this. This is incredible. Like, but I'll do my best just to cover off on the bigger events. And so basically about this time actually last year, so about August-ish 2023, I started getting this pull and this feeling and then like communication from God that I needed to downsize. Once again, loved where was at. Olive and I were in this beautiful apartment. It was like 2 stories. It had a ton of light, floor to ceiling windows for 2 stories. Like it was in a really convenient location, but we also had like woods directly out of our window. And so there was tons of wildlife. I mean, like deer and birds and squirrels. And like, it was just lovely. It was the perfect spot for us at this season of life. And it just was like too loud to ignore. God's like, you need to downsize, you need to downsize, you need to downsize. And I was like, no, why? What do you mean? I like it here. Olive loves it here. We're 5 minutes from her gymnastics. We're 8 minutes from her school. We're in a peaceful place. The kittens can run up and down the stairs. Like, what are you talking about? We can afford it. It's fine. Like, I don't understand. And so instead of continuing to question it, because I feel like, I don't know if it's everybody, but everybody I'm surrounded with, at least, we love to justify and question and clarify things. Like there has to be a reason. And this past season has really taken me back to my younger years where I'm like, actually, the reason is I feel that it needs to be done. And then I find out later, maybe not, but usually it could be a week later, a day later, it could be a couple years later, it could be a decade later, which has happened to me too. Like, oh, that's why we did that, But either way, I knew from all of those experiences that I had listed out earlier with you, like, I know this feeling. I know that God is calling me to trust him. He wants me to take a leap of faith. I feel it. I feel that muscle flexing. I know something big is coming. I don't know what it is, but I know he's asking me to downsize. And so instead of continuing to question why, I just went, okay, all right, I will. And so I started getting rid of all of my stuff. I started selling it. I started bringing it to Goodwill. I started throwing it in the dumpster outside, which like I'm a really like sustainable freak. And so to throw things away in the dumpster outside is actually a radical move for me. And I did a lot of that. And I was like, okay, shed. Like we're doing this. And then about a month and a half into that, I got a notice from my apartment that we were leasing or that we were renting from that said, hey, we're going to raise your rent. And it's going to be like $2,300 a month, which is like outrageous. And I was like, well, that's a large hike and I can't afford that on my own. So good to know. I'm glad that I've been downsizing. It'll be easier to move. We could move within that apartment community to a smaller 2-bedroom apartment because we had like the big luxury one. Like we could move to like a smaller one and it would have saved us a lot of money. So or just the 1-bedroom, and just Olive and I would share, like we'd figure it out. Like there were options. And I was like, okay, well, I'm glad we downsized because then I can move a little bit easier. So thanks, God. That was nice. Thanks. That was a nice little heads up. And then I just got this feeling again from him that was like, no, you need to go live with somebody. Like you need to live like in the basement of somebody's house, or like you need to rent out something that is like somebody that you can trust. And I was like, that's very specific. And I guess I don't understand. It's like, but okay. And so I actually had Olive in a homeschool co-op at the time, and I went to her co-op director because when I dropped her off, we had little chats from time to time. And I was like, listen, I got to tell somebody this. God's telling me that I need to like move in and like rent somebody's like an apartment or like somebody's room in somebody's house. And I was like, and I don't know why, but I feel like I need to answer that call. Like I need to follow that. And she goes, oh, well, my daughter is finishing out her basement apartment. It's 2 bedrooms and it'll be available October 1st. And that was when my lease was up.
Oh
Like,
my
shut up.
gosh.
I was like, are you serious? She goes, yeah. And she goes, I'll give you their number. So she gives me their number. I give him a call. We talked for like 2 hours.
Wow.
Her daughter's husband was a youth pastor. Her daughter is in she's a nurse, but she went to school for organic agriculture, and they had like a big organic garden out back, like just like alignment, you know.
Mhm.
They had a newborn baby and they were looking for somebody to also kind of like exchange services. And I had been babysitting other kids during that time and felt like called to like practice my baby skills. And I was like, it's just so aligned, right? And so I was like, okay, well, this is it. And so um, we ended up, they didn't have the apartment finished in time for the October 1st date. And so we pushed it back a little bit, and it was November 1st, and then it was November 2nd, and then it was November 3rd. And I was like, I'm moving on the 4th, no matter what. I don't care if it's ready or not. You can literally update it while we're there. I'll help you put in trim. Like it's not a big deal, like we just need a place to stay because we're moving out.
Right.
And I've moved across the country, unfortunately, many times. And this little tiny move from like city to city was the hardest move I've ever had. It was emotionally, physically draining. It was so hard and I couldn't figure out why. I was like, what is this? And I ended up actually talking with somebody over the past like 6 months, and they were like, do you know about how'd they put it? Like spiritual jurisdiction, essentially. And I was like, no, what's that? And they were like, well, this realm isn't necessarily ruled by God. It's ruled, there are dark forces that rule several areas too, right? Like they have kind of their domain. And sometimes they put their claws in your back because they don't want you to leave it, because then you're out of their control and you're in somebody else's zone. And I got like full body chills, and I was like, oh my gosh, like that's totally what it was. Like I didn't even think about that, but it was like absolute confirmation. So that was really interesting because God was like, here, open path, but that didn't mean it was easy.
Mhm.
Also with that, I want to mention like a week before we were going to move. So everything was getting pushed back. It was getting hard. It wasn't like the easiest thing to do. My apartment came back to me and said, hey, actually, if you want to stay in your apartment, we'll just raise the rent $10. And so there was this open window of like, you could do this. Actually, you could just stay. And that would be a lot easier, right?
Mhm.
And it would have been a lot easier. And it took a heck of a ton more courage to be like, no, God's calling me to this. Because everything inside of me wanted to stay in that place.
Yeah.
And it was just this external call that I listened to. And I feel like it was the biggest story of trust in my life, of that blind faith, of hearing the call from God and saying, okay, I will do this. It's against my better judgment. It's against my comfort zone. It's against what I think is right. I know for a fact that your environment impacts your behavior and your psyche, right? So I chose that apartment because it had big lights, and it was, and it was open, and it had a fireplace, and it was cozy, and, it was all the things. And then we're moving into a tiny, cold, windowless basement. And I knew that my psyche would just not like that. Like that's not good for Olive or myself, right? It went against everything, but I knew that that's what I was supposed to be doing. It's what he'd called me. So I said, okay, well, let's do it then. And so we did it. And that was November 4th, 2023. 4 days later, I got called into an office at work and told that my entire team was being laid off. And so at my company, they laid off 40% of the company. This is
Oh
a
my
global
gosh.
organization, multi-billion dollars. So it was a huge layoff. And we didn't think that we'd be impacted because we already had a super lean team, and we had had women go into early retirement that were on our team. And so we thought we were good. We were given the green light. And then our whole team got laid off. But with that 40% layoffs, my team was the only team that I know of in the entire company that didn't get let go that day. We told we were getting laid off, and we had until the end of the year. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's insanity. I feel so taken care of. But also, I had been praying for a year at least. I was like, God, I know this sounds ridiculous, but like, I want to not work and get paid so that I can start this podcast. I got a small severance package. So I literally got to not work and get paid and started the podcast. And I was like, I don't understand.
It's so amazing.
But again, I feel like it was a reward, a direct reward, right? For like, okay, if this is what you want, then this is what's going to have to happen in order to get you there. And so the idea of trying to own my first house in this market as a single person with other responsibilities is just absolute insanity. Like it's just not going to happen. But I was like, I just know that I feel like I need that for my daughter and I. Do we? No. What did I explore? I was like, can we live in a van? Can we do van life? Like, I don't know, like what do we need to do? And I'm very open to it. I definitely have a hippie soul. So like, but I felt like we should be buying a house. And I was like, it's absolutely impossible, especially now that I don't have a job. I applied vigorously to places for 6 months and didn't get a single job. And it was so frustrating. But I spent 5 months in a basement with my daughter, resting and bonding with her. And I would have never had the opportunity to do that in any other circumstance. Like I feel so blessed. And I felt like an absolute bum living in these like strangers' basement and not working and like staying in my pajamas all day for a lot of time. And just like, but at the same time, I was like, no, like, I actually think this has a purpose. I think I'm resting up because there's going to be a really busy season up ahead. And I could just feel that. I could feel God was preparing us for that. And I said, okay, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to like take my self-critical mind and push it aside and then do the podcast and just be with my daughter and just rest and like become a basement troll. It's going to be fine.
Can we just recognize that though? Because resting is so against societal norm. Like resting is bad, like, or it's a
Look, yeah.
reward. Like you have to work hard in order to rest and receive. And look what your story, just like, it's just the trust in God. And like you said, you knew that apartment was good for your psyche and your nervous system, like you see nature out your front windows and like what a beautiful experience. And then you got the pull of like, oh, only $10 more. Like, the devil was definitely on your shoulder of like, oh, just stay here. But then imagine if you would have stayed, you
Right. What
lost
could
your
have
job.
happened?
Yeah.
Yep.
Like you were trusting, even though the path wasn't clear, like I like the green light analogy, like just a little crack in the door. Like, okay, I'm going to take it. I know you're going to hold my hand and be alongside me through this journey. And then to be in a basement with no light, no windows, but you got to like rest and restore and be with Olive and connect. And like you said, I'm sure there was a lot of pull on, oh, that I'm being lazy, or I should be doing this, or I should be out there trying to apply for a job or be productive, but no, like you said, you felt the pull for the podcast, and that gave you opportunity to create what you've built.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it was a lot in my own head. I mean, and also just like an autonomic, what is it called? Like
The autonomic,
yeah.
autonomic, or
Autonomy, I don't know, whatever it is. Like my my body was so used to nonstop working since I was like 12. You know, I mean, I've had a job outside the house since I was 10. Like,
Wow.
I didn't know what that was, to just like not be working and
Right.
having that like massive corporate responsibility. And so like there's also a part of my entire body that was like, you should be doing, if you're not doing like that, like guilt, you know?
Mhm.
And then of course people from the outside, how's the jobs hunt going? Obviously with good intention, you know?
Sure.
And after a while I just started going, it's not. It's not. I'm gonna go take a nap. And like the responses were not beautiful, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't really care because I know I'm taken care of. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I know for a fact that I just made one of the biggest leaps, and I know that it's for a reason. And I feel once again that something big's coming, and I don't know what it is, but God's preparing me. And so I'm just gonna trust it. And so I was like, I feel like it's like April, end of April. And I was telling one of my close friends, also can't miss this. There's a couple of big things within this timeline too. So if I hadn't moved exactly when I did, I calculated it out, I wouldn't have had enough money to even break my lease. And we have successfully made it all the way to now, where I have another job and I'm employed, and I actually have a way better job than I had this time last year, making much more money, which is really nice. But we made it all the way to now without ever overdrawing. And that was literally by the grace of God, because there was 2 months where I was like, we're out of payments from my
stipend or your severance.
Exactly. Severance. There we go. Severance payment. And I couldn't get unemployment. I never got unemployment. It was the weirdest, hardest, weird in between thing. But I said, okay, it's not for me then. It's for somebody else. That's fine, you know? And I just kind of like was okay with it because I knew, again, God would take care of us. And there was 2 months where I was like, it was like 4 days before rent was due. And I was like, I sincerely don't know how I'm going to make rent. And I started crying. And I was like, this is going to be ridiculous. And I kid you not, Leslie, our friends at church who had just became friends with us the previous August, actually just when I started having these like inklings, came up to me and handed me an envelope full of $1,000. I'm like crying right now just thinking about it. And we're like, he said, God told me you needed this. And I was like, what? Because they didn't know exactly my whole situation, and they didn't know, you know, how much money I had in the account, or I could have been a baller. I could have had like, you know, $100,000 in the bank, and it, you know, a brief unemployment would have been no big deal. They had no idea, and literally scraped us by both months. Did it twice, and I was like, you can't make this up. I was like, I don't know what to do with this. And so I just continued to have extreme gratitude. And what I can say is different about this season of my life is before, when I was upset or happy, it wasn't necessarily going to God or praising God. It was going within myself, feeling my body, going to spirit, meditating, going to yoga. Like, it was still productive things, but it wasn't going straight to source. And this season of my life, it was just that. It was just source. I didn't even eat good. I didn't exercise well. Like, I gained weight, you know, like it's not like I am my healthiest version of myself. I literally didn't want anything to distract me from like, nope, it's just God. Like, I'm going to God, and like, that's it. Praise God. Thank you. Holy smokes, I'm so grateful. Also, I'm scared. God, I'm scared. I'm going to give this to you. Like, and I tried that. It's an experiment. Let's see what happens, right? Literally on the timeline I expected, or like felt, like end of April, I got news that I had an interview with the company that I'm at now. And I was like, oh, cool. Okay. I had several interviews throughout my time off. So I was like, okay, whatever. We'll see how this goes. Hopefully it's something, because I'm running out of time. Like, no money in my account. This is going to be interesting. And of course, in typical God fashion, it's like the story. Everybody has this story. I feel like everybody who takes their chances, you have like $2.08 in your account, and then your first paycheck comes in, and then you're fine. And it was exactly that, it was like it went all the way down. And the thing is again, I've exercised this courage muscle enough where I was like, I know that it's going to run down. He's not going to let me have like $4,000 in the account and then get a job. Like, we're going to go all the way down. And he's going to say, you're not going to do something stupid, like apply for McDonald's, right? You're not going to do something stupid, like distract yourself from what you're really worth, right? And you have to trust that and just stick with it, because how many people in my ears were saying, oh, McDonald's is hiring and they hire above minimum wage, and, and then you got Starbucks, and then you got this, that, there's jobs everywhere. And I was like, yeah, but that would distract me from parenting,
the greater good,
regulate my nervous system, my podcast, and the type of job that I know I'm going to get. I won't be fully prepared or even available to interview for the type of job that I know I'm going to get unless I don't take those sorts of jobs,
Right.
And so it was just all about like truly, truly trusting. And long story short is everything just started going right. So from like resting and nothing going right, May hit, and like it has been a fire hose of blessings, like an absolute, it's so overwhelming, but it's so great because all of these blessings, Leslie, are things that I've never experienced before in my life. I've never experienced this much money coming from a job. I've never experienced this much freedom and respect from my boss. I've never experienced this much the type of friendships that I have that are such a deep level. And I really feel like they're like reciprocating the type of love and friendship that I've put out my whole life. I've never felt it back. And literally just like talking to my friends and having them help me move and stuff, I've been crying because I just feel so grateful and overwhelmed. And it's old friends and new friends, but it's just a new level of friendship that I haven't experienced before with them. I bought my first house by myself, and it's not a junky house. Like, it's really freaking cute. And it's in like a little HOA, and we're in a cul-de-sac, and Olive has there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 houses immediately around us, and 3 of them have kids her age. Like, you can't ask for something
perfect.
better. You know what I mean? Like, it was just, I just like blessing after blessing after blessing after blessing. I got these, I didn't have a table or a dining set when we were in the basement apartment because there was no room for one. So we ate on the floor or in my bed, for 6 months. And being 33 years old, like that's a little demeaning, to be honest. Like there's some gremlins inside my mind that really wanted to be like, really? And it was really packed. It was really packed down there because we downsized a lot, but we had a lot of stuff, a 10-year-old and a 33-year-old, like we had a lot of stuff. And so just getting those gremlins out of the way. And like I don't know. I just feel so blessed. And I feel like, sorry. I was going with the dining set. So I bought this dining set off Facebook Marketplace. It was listed for $50. It's like beautiful old, kind of like a French looking dining set. And it was oak. And I was like, perfect, because I want to refinish it and like make it white or like a light bleached wood, and we'll make it a little French looking and have like this cool little French farmhouse thing. $50. That's awesome. Absolutely. I'll come take it. And then I looked on their website and saw on their listings and saw they also had a China hutch thing for sale for $30. I was like, done. That's awesome. Yeah. And then a buffet listed for free. And I was like, I will take all 3. I'll be there with Sunday with a trailer and my friend. So I went up there with my friend in a trailer, and we were loading things up. She brought her boyfriend, and she goes, if you got all this for like $650, that's a great deal. And I said, Ellie, I got it for $80. And she said, what? That's insane. And the whole ride up there, I was telling her and her boyfriend, Nick, about all of the crazy, incredible blessings that have been happening like every single day. Like I said, little things every day. It was just like winning, 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 winning. And I was like, this is such a winning streak I've never been on before, you know, but I do feel like it was my reward for just absolute obedience in the face of absolute adversity. And she was like, with your luck, you'll probably find like some vintage jewelry in these drawers or something, you know, because it was clearly from somebody who passed away, I think. And so we're like, oh yeah, ha ha ha. We open up the buffet and we get back and there's $100 in the drawer. So literally like little things like that were happening every, so I got paid $20 for, you know, half the furniture in my house now. And so it's like
Right.
just insane little things like that that kept happening and kept happening. And I am scared shitless to have my first mortgage. I'm scared to have it by myself. I'm scared to have it at a place. So I'm actually working at the company that laid me off before, just in a different department. That's scary. Because they laid me off once before and I don't feel very secure with that, you know, and I would rather be an entrepreneur so I can control my own destiny, but it seems it's not time for me to do that full time yet. So
Sure.
again, I'm just listening, you know, and nodding and saying, okay, clearly there's a lot that you need me to do here before that stage. And so that's where I'm at. But yeah, that's my story that I've been dying to tell somebody. And so thank you for opening this up for me. But just between last August and now this August, my life has transformed in so many ways. Literally, my relationships, my friendships, my financial situation, my job, my parenting style, my nervous system, I've moved twice. I bought my first house. Like, and I decided before all this was changing that maybe the change that I needed was to run my first half marathon. So I signed up for that, which is this October, the end of October. And so I've been unsuccessfully training for that this summer because of all the other things that have happened. But again, it was through my church and, you know, bringing water to people who don't have it and stuff. And so like, it's good, but like, when I tell you that I knew I was resting for a busy season, I did not know that it was this busy. Like, but I actually have the energy for it, which this time last year, it would have literally, I would have went probably deep into depression and who knows, like there's no way. And so the fact that I just also trusted that the rest was what I needed because I knew that he was also going to give me the energy I needed when the time came. And I was trying not to be afraid also of like, because there was definitely a part of me that said, I'm not used to this. I'm not used to having these plans. I'm not used to this sort of job. I'm not used to owning a house. I'm not used to spending this kind of money. It scares the heck out of me to say yes to this stuff. It'd be a lot easier to only say yes to one thing.
Right.
And then kind of let the rest of it fall away. But I was like, I know God's going to give me the energy for it. And he did. And I feel like a totally different person. And I kind of feel like Superwoman, honestly, right now. Not that everything's perfect, but I'm just proud of myself because I would have never felt this way again 6 months ago. You know, I was like, the only thing I can do is stay in bed all day.
I'm proud of you. You know, trusting, abiding, receiving, resting, you know, like sometimes it's hard to receive too. Like we want all these things, but then when God gives them to us, we're like, well, what do you want me to do with it? You know, or like, or I'm not worthy of this, or like, no, I gave this to you. Like it's a
push
gift.
it away.
Like, yeah. And so I think everything that I feel like we need like a part 2 podcast episode because so just like we didn't even touch on the nervous system and like parenting. And I thought, again, that's what I thought we were gonna like. I love letting women share their story. And I am so grateful that you shared that story because all the while that this has happened in the last year, you were still parenting Olive. Like it's
exactly.
So like this is the most amazing message. And I'm just like so proud of you and like how in tune you are with your relationship with God. And like you said, you're strengthening that courage muscle and like, like what the feeling is or the gremlins or like that's, and I think that's probably really helpful for not only you, but Olive's nervous system, like to co-regulate and like, when something stressful is about to happen, but you're able to maybe regulate your nervous system that like you kind of mentioned was a little bit dysregulated when you had worked since you were 10 years old and constant like that probably took a lot for you to just rest for 6 months and you were resting is something like it's not nothing, so doing nothing or napping, like God, the seventh day was made for a reason and we don't take it to rest. And I've totally leaned into that more. Like there will always be a to-do list. There will always be laundry. There will always be things to like, we have to rest and restore our bodies. And so, your message, just everything in it, it's just so juicy and yummy. And it's like perfect. Like I'm ready for fall to just like cuddle up with a blanket and some warm tea or something and like listen to this episode again. Cause it's, oh my gosh, so amazing, Caylie. I just love everything that you shared. And I guess it's like a cliffhanger. Like now people will have to go check out your podcast for some nervous systems.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I hesitated or I contemplated, I should say, whether to tell this story or not, because it's not a whole lot of like direct parenting in the story. It's like the God, but I think that's where the magic is because if I wasn't a mom, if I didn't have the sole responsibility of Olive's life, to be completely honest with you, it's a lot easier to be courageous because you're just kind of doing stuff, and nobody else is accounting on you. And of course, your life, not to discount not having kids, but like your life depends on the decisions that you make. It just is something completely different when it's somebody else that depends on the decisions that you make. And so like having the courage to make really big life-changing decisions that seem to be the wrong one, like it seemed to be the wrong decision from the outside looking in to move to some stranger's basement apartment in a town that I did not like. And actually in the town that my dad took his own life. Like that sort of energy hanging around still, like, I mean, it was such a, like, there's so much to dive into there, but it didn't seem like the right thing to do as a parent also, because I knew that the environment that we were in was good for my daughter. And the last thing I wanted to do was change that. And so the reason I told this story was because even though Olive's name wasn't mentioned so much throughout it, like it was all about her. And it was all about having that courage as a parent to say, listen, I'm going to show you what happens when you trust God.
Yeah. Lead by example.
Yeah. Because me telling you will never get you anywhere. Right. And so like leading by example and showing her and bringing her on that journey with me too. I was very open with her with a lot of it. And I'd say, hey, honey, I know that this isn't what you want to do. I mean, the tears and the cuddles and the sadness of that move from the nicer apartment to the basement was like immense, and it was hard. But I just held her and I just said, I know, I'm scared too. I know this isn't what I want to do really either, but the reason I'm doing this is because I do believe that God wants us to. And then for her now to be, I'm gonna cry one more time, but like for her to be outside playing with like all of her new friends that are her freaking age, and to tell me how much she loves our new house, and to have my friends rally around and make this the easiest move I've ever had versus the hardest just 8 months ago, like, and our cats are happy here, and like to see that come full circle. Like I gave her that experience now. She knows it's not always easy, but like it's worth it when you're doing something for the right reasons. So,
well, I would just want to commend you again. And I think you led by example. You showed Olive how to abide in God. Like it's almost, it's like a linear, parenting relationship, like God and you're his child and you're you're teaching her and showing her how to obey, how to abide, and to trust, and all, like I said, all the, to rest, to receive. I mean, she's learning by example, and you learn through experiences. And something that our mentor, Kathy Heller, talks about is take the how out of it. Could you have even howed your way to where you are today
Absolutely
a year
not.
ago? Like you've just taught her so much through this life experience of like it's part of the human nature, human body, like we're supposed to suffer. Like suffering is part of life on earth. And there are some times when you have to do hard things or things that you don't really want to do, but like just the whole thing, the whole story is just so beautifully. And where you guys have landed, I'm just so happy for both you and Olive, and you're in this beautiful space and that's yours, and it's worth it because her friends, I mean, just how harmonious this whole last year of your life has been. And like you said, for the next, there are peaks and valleys of life. That's just part of our human nature. And so to be prepared that much better for the next, the next valley, like it's but to reap the peaks as well, and to receive, I think like you said, blessing after blessing. I'm ready to receive because I've trusted and I've abided, and I can't say those words enough because I just feel like that's like the whole theme. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and the scary thing with you saying that too is like, so one of the ways that God communicates with me is through like animals as well. And so like he'll send like about this time last year. Yeah. He was sending hawks my way. And I was like red tail hawks. And I was like, okay. And so I look at, what does this mean? And pray, what does this mean? And then I'd see it in the Bible and all these things. He's been sending them again over the past week. And one literally went right next to my head like 2 days ago. And I was like, no, what is it? No, wait a minute. I'm not ready for the, what do you want? Like, so cliffhanger, we'll see. Hopefully it's nothing. Maybe it's like a full circle moment. It's just wrapping up the loose ends, I'm hoping, but usually that's not the case with like hawk energy. So
well, I will hope and pray for you. And it's just like you said, kind of the end.
yes, only good things moving forward. And I feel that. I don't feel any catastrophic bad things like I did last year. I think that there's more to come, that I think that it's a positive momentum season, for us here, which will be good. So it's about time. I'm ready for it.
Yes, 100%. Well, Caylie, looking back, I mean, wherever you want to stand from, looking back, hindsight 2020, what would you have told your old self, knowing what you know now?
I would say just keep leaning in to your relationship with God. Whatever you feel that means. If for the moment it means reading the Bible and trying to learn about the story, whether in the moment it means just getting really quiet and listening, whether in the moment it means looking back on some of your journal entries and seeing the way that God has worked and you didn't realize it until you look back now. Just building that relationship is huge, and building the trust, and sometimes that's little winks like, hey, with my apartment that I really liked, the little winks that he gave me were with animals. Again, it was dragonflies and butterflies. I said, I will not move into a place unless you don't let me get in the front door because there are yellow butterflies moving in front of it. That specific. And that's literally what was moving in front of our front door. And I was like, okay, yeah, but like, I'm not going to trust it yet. What about like blue dragonflies? And then the only thing that was left in our apartment that we rented out was a blue dragonfly wind chime on the back porch. And I was like, shut up. Like, but that's building the trust, right? Like that's building like the little things like that. It doesn't have to be so big and monumental. It can just be like, hey, like I love you and I know how much you love me. And I've experienced your love, but like, let's build this trust. So you do those little things for me, and like, I'll do some bigger things for you. And like, let's kind of keep building this. And that's the advice I would give myself. And I did that, but there's always room to do more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. Well, this was such an amazing conversation. I am just beaming ear to ear right now. I'm so grateful for you to be here and to share your gift and your presence. And thank you again for coming on. And if you would like to just share where everybody could find you and your, like you said, I know we kind of talked about in the beginning, the podcast and social media, if that's where you care to hang out at, or a website, anything, please feel free to share it here.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is great. And I just love you, and I love your energy, and I love your personality. And I just wish I could give you a big hug. So
I know
virtual meetings are amazing, but yeah. So thank you. So my name once again is Caylie Opatik. And the best place to be in touch with me is on Instagram, I'd say. And so my Instagram handle is The Responsible Parent. And I have links to my podcast, whatever platform you'd like, in my bio on Instagram and on Facebook. We do have a Facebook group called The Responsible Ones. That's a private group that's just for parents who want to help inform my podcast episodes. And so if you're like, hey, we homestead and we want to homeschool, or we want to transition to raw milk, or like whatever, like we want to be more responsible with like the time we have here, and we want that community. That's what that's for. It's a free community. And literally I just go in there and say, hey, what do you guys want me to talk about? And then we vote on it. And then I try to find a guest, or if I have my own personal experience, it informs our episodes. So you can always DM me to ask about being a part of that group as well.
Perfect. And I can include the link in the show notes if you'd like.
Sure.
Awesome. Well, Caylie, thank you so much. And I hope you have a great day.
Thank you for joining me and listening to the Kindred Journey Podcast. If this episode resonated with you, please consider taking the time to rate and review the podcast and share this episode with family and friends who you think might enjoy it. Your positive feedback helps me reach more courageous women like you. This is my passion project, so without you, I wouldn't be here doing this, and I deeply appreciate your support. Until next time.